Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the martial arts and anything else they may be involved in. My guest today is a former high school wrestler and teacher who attended UCLA. He was a pro MMA fighter with a record of 5-1, stopped fighting when he was offered the job to host the Discovery Channel's Fight Quest. He was also a co-host during season 2 and 3 of American Ninja Warrior, has been a commentator for Bellator, UFC, Invicta, and more. He was also a commentator on Monday Night Raw for the WWE and is a current host on SiriusXM's Unlocking the Cage. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Jimmy Smith. How you doing today, sir?
Good. That's a lot, huh?
It is.
That's a lot. You have to like think about it. Jesus, that's a lot. Yeah, man.
That's good though.
I'm also currently working for ESPN and Combate.
Awesome.
So I got 3 gigs.
I couldn't find that anywhere, so that's awesome. That's cool.
It's nuts. Yeah, because that's what I'm currently doing. So,
okay.
And I don't check up on. I don't like edit my own Wikipedia page and stuff because there are some errors on there.
Okay.
But, yeah, I don't really like. I'm not that kind of person. So it's like, and I work for ESPN, I work for Combate, I work for SiriusXM right now. Yeah, I don't go out there and talk about myself.
You're like me. You like to stay busy though too. So
yeah, but I really like staying busy. So yeah, all those things right now, man. It's craziness. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, kind of how we like to kick the show off. You know, I know you started in wrestling. I'm just kind of curious. Was wrestling the first any type of martial art or combative sport you're involved in? And if so, what led to that? Kind of what kicked off that interest in combative art, combative sports for you, and kind of launched your martial arts journey?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that when I did it, wrestling wasn't considered a martial art.
Right.
Right. It was a sport, and I always kind of have disputes with people sometimes where they call, wrestling's a martial art. And I was like, hurting someone in wrestling is illegal. Yeah. It's called potentially dangerous. They stop. If you crank somebody's neck, you crank somebody's arm, they stop it. And if you do it again, you get dinged a point, you get disqualified. So it only became really a martial art when the UFC came around and wrestlers started whooping everybody's butt. Mm-hmm. And then it was, wrestling's a martial art. And no, it's sport, because to me, the definition of a martial art is at the end of the day, hurting somebody is at least part of what you're doing. And if not actively encouraged, if it happens, like if you're doing a point style karate thing and you knock somebody out, you're not disqualified, right? Yeah. So in wrestling, there are a lot of rules to keep people safe because, high school kids do it and, a lot of younger people do it. Mm-hmm. So when I started, it was just a sport. It wasn't really considered a martial art. Just got into it in high school. It was the only sport I had really done at all in my life.
So you didn't start till high school?
Didn't start till high school.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which is weird, but it's weird. I grew up in a very isolated place. I grew up in an Orange Grove till I was 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't have a neighborhood with kids and that did sports stuff. My nearest neighbor was a couple miles away. So you're very isolated. I didn't do sports like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved to Long Beach, when I was 9 or 10 years old, I still had that mentality and my parents weren't sports people. So it didn't really, my grandfather was a boxer. My dad knew how to box, but they didn't really put me in any direction, for sports or athletics or anything like that. Okay. So I kind of just had to do everything myself. I just kind of figured everything out myself. And then once I did wrestling in high school, I went to UCLA. They don't have a wrestling team. And they had a wrestling club where these guys who had wrestled in high school or whatever would get together and just wrestle for fun. We just mess around. And that's when a jiu-jitsu coach walked in and said, hey, my jiu-jitsu class starts in this room at, 7 o'clock. You should come check it out. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I showed up and started doing it and loved it. And that's kind of what started everything, was that. And then me and a bunch of friends at UCLA would rent out a racquetball court and do like mixed martial arts, basically. Like we'd get together and like teach each other stuff and spar and do all that stuff. And it was fun, man. I had a good time. And then my professional career started after that, after I graduated. It wasn't originally my intention. It was just something that I thought was fun.
What was the original intention? I mean, obviously, it sounds like you took a 180. So a history teacher.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to be a history teacher. My degree's in history. I wanted to go to graduate school and get my master's and my doctorate at UCLA and go on from there and teach people. And it didn't end up happening. And so it just completely changed my life in that, because I was getting pretty good at jiu-jitsu pretty quickly. I was getting really good really fast, but I didn't think about it as a career or a life. And then I didn't get into graduate school at UCLA. And my girlfriend at the time were sitting there, and I got the rejection letter. And I remember she said, you're getting really good at that fighting thing. Why don't you try that? I swear to God, it's just how it started was, well, I can't do this anymore. I guess I'll do that. And I did. And here I am, whatever it is, 25 years later. Yeah.
So how long had you been doing jiu-jitsu before you decided to make the jump to MMA? 9
months.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was,
wow.
It was like, I was messing around at UCLA, just kind of doing it, a couple times. The class was like Tuesday, Thursday or something. And then I started messing around with the kids in the racquetball court. And then I graduated from UCLA, and I went to Europe for a little while. And when I came back, about 3 months, I did kind of a backpacking thing. And I came back, and I'm driving through Huntington Beach, California, and there was a sign that said jiu-jitsu. And I pulled over and I said, hey, I want to check it out. Well, it turned out to be Team Punishment, which was Tito Ortiz and, Jason Miller and Rob McCullough and Tiki and all these, like, a ton of pros were training out of there at the time. And they said, yeah, come on in. I came on in, and 9 months later, my coach calls me. And this is when I was, doing it every day. And my coach calls me, and he goes, hey, you want to fight Sunday? It's Friday afternoon. And I said, yeah, sure. And it was behind a bar in San Pedro. And they got us all, and they lined us all up, and they didn't even weigh us. They were just like, all right, you're about the same size. You're going to fight that guy. And I was like, all right. And I was the 13th of 13 fights. Wow. And I armbarred him in 28, 29 seconds. And I went, okay, I guess I'll do more of this. It was weird. It was just like, that's how it worked back then. I was like, oh, I guess I'll do it. That's kind of the way it's always been is, gee, okay, I guess I'll do this. And I did it. And once again, here I am. Yeah, it was crazy.
And I'm assuming that was before the days of sanctioning and stuff. So, or was that an actual sanctioned fight?
Oh, no. Okay. MMA wasn't my last fight, or the one before my last fight, one of them was the first sanctioned fight in California. The first sanctioned card in California was like the end of my career, 2005, 2006, something like that. So you had to fight out on Indian reservations. Yep. That's how they got around it. You fought on Indian reservations. And you hoped you got paid. You hoped you got paid what he said he was going to pay you, because there were no protections, because it wasn't sanctioned. I mean, he could just stiff you, and what are you going to do, right? Yeah. So that's how it worked back then. If you got hurt, you're on your own. It was a different world. And so that's how I started my MMA career, was in that kind of underground, unsanctioned world,
And I used to judge that. I judged MMA for about 1,000 total fights I judged. And I remember the first probably 1 to 200 were unsanctioned. And I remember there were a few times where like a fighter wouldn't show, and they'd get up there with the microphone. Anybody out there in the audience want to fight tonight? $150. Yeah. I'm like, wow.
Happened all the time. And
you just think back now, it's crazy.
Yeah. Or you'd show up and this happened to a guy I used to train with, Giuliano Prado, jiu-jitsu guy out of Southern California. And he showed up, and they went, yeah, your opponent didn't show up. You got to fight this middleweight. And he was like 155. Wow. And they're like, oh, we got a middleweight for you. And it's either fight or just go home. Like, Mm-hmm. And so without sanctioning, stuff like that happened constantly. And I remember this one guy weighing in. It was one of my opponents, but it wasn't for my fight. He had sold a ton of tickets, and he showed up, and he weighed in and made weight, and he goes to the promoter, and he goes, oh, here are the tickets I sold, and he sold like 200 tickets. And the guy goes, oh, man, I didn't know you sold that many tickets. I wouldn't have had you weigh in.
Seriously?
I didn't realize that you sold that many tickets. Nah, you wouldn't have to go through all this.
Wow.
Because it just didn't, you weighed in a bathroom scale in the lobby of the hotel. Nobody was, oh, your opponent already weighed in. He's good. All right, you don't know if they're telling you the truth. You have no idea. So that was the world. It was the Wild West, man. It was no rules, kind of. Not just in the cage, but in outside, right?
I know one of the ones I judged one time. I won't mention the name, but there was a bigger name fighter that was fighting a local guy, and the local guy beat him. Every judge had in the winner in the cards, and the promoter brought all the judges together. It's like, we can't say this big name lost. He's like, so I'm going to announce him the winner. And we're like, what? Why are we here? And they announced the other guy the winner. And I'm like, to this day, I'm like, yeah, I know that guy technically has one more loss on his record than he should. So
there was a fight that, this is public. I'm not giving anything away. Razor Rob McCullough, a guy I used to train with, was taking a guy named Harris Sarmiento, who was a kind of a local guy, fought some decent guys, but never a great fighter. And Harris kept winning, and they kept adding rounds, like embarrassingly, where it was, 3 rounds, and it was clear that Rob lost. And all right, we have a draw. We're going to go to another round. They added another. It was just so obvious they were going to add rounds until Rob won. Wow. And I think Harris actually won the fight, but it was like that. It was like embarrassing sometimes. And I was told a lot of times for fights, like, if you're in another guy's home territory, you better kill him.
Jeez.
You better make this abundantly clear that you won because you ain't getting a decision here. And that was how it was. Yeah, it was very, very difficult. Let's put it that way.
Definitely. So then it looks like you, over about a 2 to 3 year period, you had your 6 fights. Is there one that stands out of those pro fights?
Yeah, there are a few. I fought James Wilkes, who won the Ultimate Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And this was early in both of our careers. I think it was my second fight.
Yep.
I don't remember his first or second fight. But the funny thing is that we had met like 3 weeks before at a Machado grappling event. And for some reason, I don't remember why, we started talking to each other. We're sitting there in the rules meeting, and they said something. I was like, oh, that's weird. The guy goes, yeah, isn't it? I forget why. But we ended up talking at the tournament. So we're sitting there waiting for our matches, and we're just sitting there, shooting the shit, both by ourselves. And back then, you didn't necessarily know who you were fighting when you got a fight. So I showed up it was a King of the Cage or Gladiator Challenge or something like that. And I saw James. I said, hey, man, how you doing? He goes, oh, good, man, good. And we're looking at the thing. Oh, who are you fighting? And we turned down. Oh, fighting each other. And we ended up sitting next to one another in the rules meeting. So we're talking or whatever. And then the promoter, I think it was Ted Williams, said, okay, we're going to stand up so you see who your opponent is. And they, so-and-so and so-and-so, and they stood up. And then it went, Jimmy Smith. And I stood up and goes, James Wilkes. And he stood up next to me, and everybody started laughing because we were sitting next to each other. And Ted's like, oh, you guys getting along? I'm like, yeah, until tomorrow, whatever it is. And in the fight itself, I got a knee bar on James. But as we were rolling around, and I'm trying to get the knee bar, and he's hitting me like with everything he's got to get out of it, I felt my knee pop bad. I was like, it's one of those like you hear.
Oh, yeah.
And I went, oh, crap. And I got the knee bar, and I won. And by the time I got out of the cage, and I couldn't walk anymore. It was that bad, even with all the adrenaline and everything. So it's funny. People always tell me, like, man, you were so tenacious for that knee bar in that fight. You wouldn't let it go. Number one, that's just how I grapple anyway. Once I get some nice go for it. And the other thing was I couldn't stand up. I knew if we stood up, I would be limping and he'd kill me. And so it was either finish this knee bar, or you're going to lose. And I finished it and I won. But I was, one-legged at that point. So that fight certainly stands out in a big way.
That's cool.
Just everything about it was weird,
That's crazy. Yeah, and as someone with lifelong knee injuries, I feel your pain on that one.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah.
I had the knee pop thing once, and it's not good. So then, during that time you were pro fighting, were you still training in jiu-jitsu, or were you pretty much focusing on MMA at the time?
No, I was competing in jiu-jitsu a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
So, which was kind of the problem, I guess, when people are like, what would you have done differently and all this stuff. Back then, there was an ecosystem of gyms that could get you through a local fight, but they couldn't get you to the next level. They couldn't get you to the UFC. They couldn't get you to Pride. They couldn't get you all the way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that ecosystem is almost gone now. But there were a lot of little teams that were pretty good. And I was in one of those little teams that didn't really have a whole lot of great guys and couldn't really do that much for me. And I kind of patched everything together I could get. I had a good striking coach, but there weren't a lot of MMA guys to help me. And what would I have done differently is if you're going to get to the next level, you got to make that commitment to a big team. You almost certainly have to get, if not to American Top Team, be affiliated with American Top Team or AKA or Jackson Wink or any of the big teams, Sarah Longo, whatever it is, because you're going to lose to those guys because they're in a Shark Tank every day. They're getting much better every day. And if you are the king of, you're the big fish in your little pond, you're not going to get as good as those guys are going to get. And I got pretty much as far as I could have gotten without that backing. But that is something that, I tell people, like, hey, man, you got to jump in with the Sharks and really be part of that environment, or else you're not going to make it. That was a big thing.
After your sixth fight, had you been thinking about hanging it up, or was the offer to hosting Fight Quest, was that the complete reason you gave it up?
That was the complete reason I gave it up.
How did that come about? How did they find you?
I also didn't know, by the way, that I was hanging it up. I never made a conscious choice to go, this is it.
Oh, okay.
What happened was I got a fight. It's an interesting story. A promoter called me named Jamie. His first name's Jamie. I forget his last name.
Okay.
Anyway, he called me, and we had grappled against one another. So I knew him, and he knew me, and we were friendly. And he said, I got a great opportunity for you. Now, the code in MMA, by the way, is great opportunity means you are the underdog, and this guy is like undefeated.
Yeah.
Great opportunity for you, Jimmy. If you win, this will be great for you. You probably won't. And one of the things I tell fighters now, I said, you're either an easy fight or a great opportunity. Your opponent is, if you're being told, oh, I got a great opportunity for you, your opponent is being told, got an easy fight for you, right? You're one or the other.
Yep.
Usually on the local level. So anyway, they said this guy's Jason Chambers is his name. He's got a contract with the UFC. This is kind of his fight right before he gets really big and goes in the UFC. He's hosting this show called Human Weapon for History Channel. And they travel around and they do different martial arts in different countries. This guy's going to be really famous and really big, and he's this good-looking guy. If you beat him, man, that'll be awesome for you. And the first thing I thought is, man, that's a cool gig, right? I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool job, man. And so I take the fight. I win the fight in the first round. I heel hook him and I beat him. Walk out of the cage, go home, and I got a call from a teammate of mine who has since passed away named Joe Camacho. Mm-hmm. And he said, there's this audition for this show where you go around and you do different martial arts in different countries. And I thought, oh shit, I injured Jason and they're looking for a replacement. And I felt terrible because there's this kind of unwritten code in MMA and martial arts that you can hurt somebody. You never want to take food out of somebody's mouth, right? Like, I'll break your knee. I'll do whatever I have to win. You don't want that person laid up to the point where they can't, work anymore. Like that, you don't want to. You will if you have to, but you don't want to, right? And I immediately thought, because they described the exact same show Jason was on, and so I was like, oh man, I injured him. And then I started realizing, I called call this producer in New York and do a phone interview. I called him, did a phone interview. They really liked me, and I started realizing it was a different show because I know Jason's had already shot at least some of the episodes, and this thing was shooting. I forget when I did the audition, but we started shooting November, I want to say 2006. So it hadn't shot yet. So as they're talking to me, I started realizing it's a different show that has pretty much the same premise. If you remember Human Weapon and Fight Quest, they had the same premise. And they did an audition at my gym in Southern California, and I crushed the audition quite well. And so what's funny is, I got it almost immediately. And the audition, and partly it was I had studied history. So what I would do is I would just talk about the history of whatever country they told me to be in. And I would describe something in that country that I knew about historically. And I was pretend I was in front of it and that we were doing this style. And they were just like, all right, you're in. Now, at the end of the audition, the producer pulled me aside and goes, as much as I can tell you, you got it. You got it. He said, I got to go to New York and I got to do some things, talk to some people, whatever. He goes, but you're our guy, basically. Nice. So I got cast first, and then they brought Doug, my co-host, out to see if we got along, to see if we clicked, and it worked. And it did. We got along great. We hung out in Venice together. He's a really great guy. And that was the start of Fight Quest. But I didn't think that would be it. I didn't know, by the way, it's my first gig in television. Mm-hmm. We shot from November 2006. We shot the pilot to spring 2008.
Wow.
I didn't realize it would take that long. I didn't know.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, but that's how it worked. Mm-hmm. There were delays. Obviously, you shoot the pilot, and then it gets greenlit, and then da-da-da-da. But I didn't know how long this kind of stuff took and what it would take out of me, and da-da-da. And by the end, it was, I was kind of on a different track by the end. By the end, in 2008, I got a call to do commentary for a promotion called Ep135 Global that was doing stuff all over the world. And they said, hey, could you fly to Amsterdam next week and be our color commentator? And I went, yeah, sure. And flew out there, did it. They liked me. I got the job. So I started doing commentary work at the same time I was doing Fight Quest. So it was just, by the time it ended, my life was just in a different place. And it wasn't that I'm never going to do this again. I never thought that way. It was just, that's how it ended up, and also, when Fight Quest started, they paid me more for my first episode than I made my whole career of MMA by double, at least. Okay. So it was also, it just didn't come, you didn't make a lot of money in MMA at the time. Yeah. So it wasn't like, I'm going to be Conor McGregor. The guy didn't exist. We didn't, so it was one of those things where I remember Eve Edwards is a friend of mine, talked about in the 10 years he was in MMA, he made $500,000. Wow. All right. Do the math. That's a teacher's salary. Yeah. He made $50,000 a year for 10 years.
Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, well, I made way more than that doing Fight Quest. Yeah. So, it just didn't make economic sense for me to go on the fight track when I was already on the TV track and, had a much more secure future in life and everything. So it wasn't that I decided to retire necessarily as much as I was in a different place by the time everything ended, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Talk a little bit about Fight Quest. Just looking through some of the episodes, you got to travel to China, Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, France, South Korea, Brazil, Thailand. Just talk about some of those and those experiences and any of those styles that you got to fight against when you were there that really had an impact on you, and maybe you started training in some of them or they kind of stuck with you a little bit.
There was almost always something I could take out of a style.
Okay.
Right? There's almost some training technique or something they did where I was like, oh, that's cool. I got to start doing that. The thing is, I think that what I take away from FightQuest in general and most is that people do martial arts for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah.
And one thing about MMA or jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever, is that idea that what would actually work and what's really effective and what is, well, people do martial arts for all kinds of reasons. So some people, the effectiveness of the style isn't really their thing, and it's the beauty of the style, or I like the mental aspect, or I like the spiritual aspect, or I like, people do stuff for all kinds of reasons. And if it's just, what is most effective, sure, then you don't have a ton of options. But if you want to do martial arts for a wide variety of reasons, there are a wide variety of styles. Also, too, I was talking to a guy he was one of the Wing Chun guys that I trained with in China. We were in Hong Kong, and he told me this story. He got robbed in an ATM. He was getting money in an ATM, and a guy, came up to rob him, and he just like chain punched the guy right into the ground.
Jeez.
Now, when they tried to chain punch me, I beat the piss out of him.
Oh, wow.
Right? I mean, if you try to chain punch a kickboxer, you can get killed because it's just like, it's this circular punch where you can't defend the left hook. It's really bad. The point of the story is, do Hapkido kicks work? Yeah, if you've never seen a kick before, and you train Hapkido and you jump kick a guy and he does not know what the fuck's going on, you knock him right out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's what martial art works. Well, most people don't know anything.
Yeah.
Most people know nothing. They don't know anything. So if you throw a really fast kung fu punch against someone who tries to rob you, doesn't know anything about hand-to-hand combat, it's going to work. It's going to work fine.
Mm-hmm.
So people have this idea of what works. Well, I'm not taking on a Muay Thai champion, am I?
Yeah.
Right? I'm not taking on Anderson Silva. So that's another way to see martial arts. And that's what I tell people is, guys, a lot of stuff works. If the other guy doesn't know anything, you're comparing your skills to people who really know what the fuck they're doing. And most people on the street have no idea. So some crazy kung fu kick, they're going to stand there and like watch and go, what is he? Boom. And you're going to knock him out. You do that to me, I'm going to take you down. I'm going to break something on you. Okay. Yeah. But I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Most people aren't.
Yep.
Most people have no idea. So that's another thing I say too, is that, hey, what's most effective for the street and all this stuff. And I always say, most people don't know anything. So anything can hypothetically be effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I say is, whatever the more extreme the attack, the less someone's done it in real life. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When I did Krav Maga in Israel, you heard all these stories. Oh man, we trained to pull somebody's eye out. And first thing it says, you ever pull anybody's eye out? Well, no. Well, then you're talking out of your ass. You have no idea whether or not we train to kill. Have you ever killed anybody with your bare hands? No. Well, then you're guessing. You're assuming. Get what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely.
Right. Like someone who goes to a shooting range and shoots, which I've done since I was a kid. It's a big difference between that and hunting, like shooting a moving target that doesn't want to get shot, or like being quiet and sneaking up on it or whatever the deal is, right? Is a world of difference from shooting a deer picture that isn't moving. Is very different than shooting a deer that will smell you and start running, And that's it too, where how do you know you could break somebody's arm, Jimmy? Because I have. In a tournament, if you don't tap, I'm going to break your arm, and I have. If you don't tap to my heel hook, I'm going to break your knee, which I have. Have I choked somebody out? Yes, I have. Mm-hmm. So I know what I do works because I've been all the way with it. You talk to a Muay Thai fighter and they go, how do you know that head kick will knock somebody out? Because I've knocked people out with it in an actual Muay Thai fight. So there's always that. Whenever somebody says they can do something deadly and they haven't killed somebody, they're guessing.
Yeah.
They're guessing. I don't know, So I've run into a lot of that too. I do this deadly technique. Ever killed anybody with it? With your death touch? All right, shut the fuck up. So there's that too. And also there's a line between like what you're being sold and what's being delivered. Okay. Like right. If you do Tai Chi for the breathing and the energy and the whatever, right. And the health, they're not going to tell you that you're safe in a street fight with Tai Chi. They're not going to sell you that. What bothers me is people who get sold a bill of goods.
Yeah.
That is inaccurate, right? You're going to be safe with this. And I've taught self-defense. I've had people show me things like, no, you won't be safe with that. Like that won't help you. Doing Taibo 3 days a week won't help you because you're not hitting a real thing and you don't know how to do that and da-da-da-da-da. Like there are a million reasons why. And you have to know what will help you and what won't help you or what's effective, what's not effective. So there are a million different martial arts, but know why you're getting in and what that style does for you. Mm-hmm. And that was something I understood as I did all these different martial arts is people do them for all different kinds of reasons. And as long as the reason lines up with the style you're doing, it's great.
How long did you spend with each style per episode roughly?
we were in country 13 days, but that is travel, setting up, and then flying out. The actual style was like 5 days.
Okay.
I had 5 days.
Wow.
And the problem is the styles that were not as legit, we had to kind of figure out how to make it look more interesting. Get what I mean? Because like there were problems with certain styles that just didn't have a lot of contact, or a style that had this or that. We had to figure out, all right, what's the hook here? How do we make this interesting? And the styles that were more legit were like inherently a little more interesting. And the only rub there was how to ramp up, because you don't ramp up in 5 days. Like I can't get fight ready in 5 days, but I had a fight at the end. So it's how much can I do without being just a mess in the final fight, right? Because if you get injured early, that's it. Like I can't heal in 5 days. So stuff like that, right, is kind of how to balance. The last 5 days before fighting MMA, you don't do anything. You're cutting weight. You're literally like doing yoga stuff. Like, all right, stay flexible, stay this. You're not sparring hard. You're not running hard unless you have to cut weight. All the hard work's done weeks before that. So it was this idea of like, when I did Kung Fu in the Shaolin Temple in China, the first day they put me through these stretches that they did with like 12-year-old kids. I'm not a 12-year-old kid. And it pulled like a ton of tendons in my legs. Ooh. And so I was limping the rest of the time. For 5 days, it was limping because they just wrecked my tendons. And so stuff like that, like you tried not to like destroy yourself on the first day. Okay. You know, because you didn't have time to get over it. When I went to Brazil and went to the Gracie Humata original school, everybody in the room fought me for 3 hours my first day. Wow. And I was like, all right, I got hazed, and that's cool. It happens. Nope, I've been through it before. No big deal. Second day, same thing from a different position. And then kept training, got sicker than I've ever been in my whole life because they wanted a shot of me swimming. And they had me swim in this area of Ipanema Beach that I found out later, you're not supposed to swim out there because there's shit in the water. Dang. And I got super duper sick, and they had to IV me. I went to the emergency room in Brazil, and I was throwing up and shitting all over the place. And they took me to the hospital in Brazil, and I fought the next day. Jeez. Against a murderer. He was amazing, this purple belt. And I was a purple belt at the time. And he was the one guy who gave me just a ton of problems. Like I did really well against, a lot of the brown belts and purple belts I was rolling with. This guy just gave me a ton of trouble. And of course, he's the guy they had me fight. And also another thing is, because of the TV show, we had to fight for like a half hour to give them enough footage to cut together to look interesting, because it's jiu-jitsu. So there's a lot of holding, and, people don't really understand what's going on. So we had to fight way longer than you'd normally fight in a jiu-jitsu match. And I'm like seeing stars and like, whoa, doing that, trying to finish the show. So a lot of stuff like that. Like I'm just fighting the environment I'm in. I'm just trying to make it through some of them, depending on. So yeah, a lot of that.
And I know a lot of fans of the show thought it was canceled way too soon. So with all these reboots happening, if they were to contact you and say, hey, we want to bring it back, would you want to be involved in any way? Or is that just part of your life you won't want to visit again?
No, I'd love to be involved in it. I can't do that stuff again.
Right.
Right. I have an artificial hip. I'm 46 years old. I can't do what I did when I was 29. So, but to be involved in it in some way, like take somebody through it and like mentor, like, I'm kind of the coach, or go around. The
coach or the host or
Yeah. Be part of it would be great.
Okay. That'd be cool.
Yeah. One of the questions I get asked all the time is kind of, why didn't it last? Oh, why, what happened? Numbers weren't very good. Because it doesn't, it's a great show. And I was like, network executives don't watch the show and go, great show or bad show, or I like this or I don't like this. They get a sheet that says numbers on it. Here's how many people watched it, and if it doesn't hit the number they expect, that's it. So I know painful experience with television. It has nothing to do with the quality of a product as much. If people will watch the Kardashians, give them more Kardashians, right? Just whatever they like, give them more of that. And that's what they do. And the numbers weren't there. And at the time we were on Discovery, I think the president changed like 3 times or something. Yeah. So that was another thing that killed us, was we were kind of the pet project of the guy who wasn't there anymore. By the time we were on air, he wasn't there. And the person who came in was like, I'm not a huge fan of that show. And just they put us on whatever it was, Friday nights or something where nobody watches television. Yeah. And that was it. And so that's another thing, is that the idea, like, this is our special thing. Well, the next president doesn't feel that way. And that's kind of how it went for us, is we got basically 1 season out of it, and that was it. And I had to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So yeah, that's the way it went.
So is that around the time you got American Ninja Warrior then?
No, that was a bit later.
Okay.
I got Bellator right as Fight Quest, where we knew for sure there wasn't going to be more Fight Quest. I got a call to do Bellator. And what had happened was I was working for M1 as a commentator, and then a bunch of people who had left M1 had gotten hired by Bellator. And when they needed a color guy, they said, you should try Jimmy Smith. And Bjorn Rebney, the guy who was running Bellator, called me when we did a phone interview. And I knew everyone in the tournaments. Either I had trained, I had trained with him, I had fought against him, I had whatever. I knew him. I just knew everybody. And so whenever he would bring up somebody, I said, oh yeah, well, here's why I think he's going to do well. Here's why I think he's not going to do well, or whatever the deal was. And he went, okay, it sounds like you're our guy. And I remember the second Bellator we did, I believe, was in Chicago.
Okay.
And the check for the first Bellator hadn't come in yet because they pay you like however many weeks it is afterward. And I had literally no money, literally no money. And every day I would go to where they were setting up, it was at the Chicago Theater, where they were setting up the fight. And they had like a little catering table there. And I would go in there and eat every day and like just make a sandwich, whatever it was. And I just was literally out of money, and I hadn't started making money from Bellator yet. But just that whatever week, I had nothing in my bank account.
Wow.
And I was just like eating at the venue every day because I had no money. It was just, I remember that just so distinctly, that was the situation in my life at that time. So that's what happened, was right as everything started running out, I got the Bellator gig just in time.
Nice.
And I worked with them till 2018, starting until the end of 2017.
Wow.
And that was 2009, 2010. So like 7 years I was with them. And then Ninja Warrior was in the middle of that. I forget what years I did Ninja Warrior, but I did 2 years of Ninja Warrior before it went to NBC. And
what was that like? I mean, because I'm a huge fan of that show. And I'm just, first of all, did you ever get to try any of the obstacles? And I'm just kind of curious, what your thoughts on, and what your thoughts on what it was when you hosted it to what it's become now.
Yeah, it was nuts. What it was, a few things. Well, let me start with what it was then. What it was then was a Japanese show that we were trying to get Americans to compete in.
Right.
So the show I did was, these people are going to run through this course. They're going to qualify for the final in Japan, right? So this isn't our show. This is their show, but we're qualifying people with this run through it. And Matt Eisman and I, who's still the host,
yep,
we kind of made it up because it was the first time it was presented as some kind of sport, right? And so it wasn't Wipeout, where the goal is to watch them fall. It's, can they really do it? Can they do it fast? And this kind of gymnastic competition, essentially, which is what it was. So we would sit there with the producer and go, all right, so how are we supposed to do this? Is this a sport? Is it this? Is that? Is it a competition? Right? Because all those things have slightly different angles on them, right? And that's how we called it. Because I want to say my first year, I think both years, I don't remember, they ran the course, and then they were on a reality show together to determine the last 5 who would compete in Japan.
The boot camp.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like this boot camp thing.
Yep.
And I wasn't at the boot camp. Matt was.
Okay.
So Matt hosted the boot camp. And then I went to Japan with everybody to watch them run the course.
Yep. Sasuke.
Yeah, Sasuke. And it was like a 23-hour day.
Wow.
We got there at 6 a.m. We stopped shooting at 4 a.m. It was just unbelievable how long the day was. And that's kind of how it was when I was there. That's what it was. And then you learn real quick how this business is, because it then went to NBC and became huge.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I don't have an agent. And one of the reasons I don't have an agent is every experience I've had with agents is they want to help themselves, not you. And I remember there was a scheduling conflict with the second, I want to say the second year I did American Ninja Warrior. They wanted to do a show the same day as the Bellator. And I said, well, I got to do the Bellator show. And my agent goes, well, you know what? You should probably quit this Bellator thing, because this thing could take you, this could be huge. And da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, they ended up moving the shoot date of American Ninja Warrior anyway, so I didn't have to choose. But, oh my God, you should totally quit doing this stupid MMA thing you're doing and do this Ninja Warrior thing. Well, as soon as it went to NBC went, nah, we don't want that guy. We want this other guy.
Wow.
And as soon as they do that, agent stops calling you. Well, that was it. I never heard from the agent again. And it's one of those things where, don't listen to people who, of course they wanted me to keep doing Ninja Warrior because they make money off that. They don't make money off my commentary gig for Bellator. So you have to think about what's better for you. And, that was the situation, right? It was, NBC, we want a football guy or whatever the hell it was. And how well you do your job doesn't necessarily matter to somebody. How famous is this person? Well,
Right.
he's an MMA guy. It's not famous enough. Get a football guy. And that was kind of how it ended for me for Ninja Warrior. Yeah, it was a fun experience, though. I loved it.
Did you ever get to try any of the obstacles?
Yeah, I did. The first season I did, or the first, what happened was they had an obstacle course, and the last thing was the warped wall.
Yep.
And then people who got, the top 10, they added another set of obstacles to the end of that with the salmon ladder and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what I did was I ran the first part of the course, and I got through it.
Nice.
Did everything.
Wow.
Got all the way up the warped wall. And then I got to that second part. And one thing you notice for the people that really do well, they're about 140 pounds. They're not, I was at the time like 180, and I jumped on the salmon ladder. And what happens is when you jump on the salmon ladder, your body starts swinging. You can't leap while your body is swinging. You have to wait for your body to stop swinging. And by the time you stop swinging, you are tired, right?
Yeah.
So I did like 2 rungs of the salmon ladder, and then I fell. And the guy told me, he goes, yeah, you got to jump. You can't jump forward because you'll start swinging, right? You have to jump down so you don't swing to kill your momentum, right? So there are these little tricks that you just don't know if you never run one of these things. You have no idea. I don't have a salmon ladder at my house. I don't know, So it's things like that where the people who have something like this at home or have run it before have just a huge advantage over someone trying to size it up and figure it out as they're doing it, which I was doing. I had no idea. So yeah, I got to run. I passed once again the original course, and then I fell on the 5 they added afterwards. I forget exactly what they were, but you realize the difference trying to move your body around. If you're 190 and they're 40 pounds, it's a scale you lose on television. You don't know how big somebody is, right? Yeah. And the one thing I told people, about running the Ninja Warrior course, I go, those guys are 5'6", 140. They're not. They can jump and grab that thing with one hand and go because they're freaking built like they're 17. I go, it's a different world than like a grown man who's 30, right? Who's 185. It's a different world. It was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. But yeah, that was what I learned there. It's like there's a reason gymnasts and UCLA, when I was at UCLA, they had a great gymnastics team, men's gymnastics.
Yes.
They were all 5'6". They're just they're little midget guys who are just all muscle, who can, hang from a whatever for an hour because they don't weigh anything. It's like it's a different,
Yeah.
So that all the guys who made it had gymnast builds, pretty much.
That's cool. What an experience. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the show, and I actually went to a taping when they came to Minnesota a few years ago, and I didn't realize at the time that it was like a complete overnight thing, and we got there at like 6 p.m. and we left at like 4:30 a.m. It was a long day.
Forever. They really cut them down.
Yeah.
They really cut them down now.
But it was fun.
That's another thing. Well, that's another thing. Matt and I, when we did our first season, we called almost everything live. We called it as live, meaning we just, as they were running through the course, we would talk, and they usually use that cut. By the time the more network something gets, the more cooks are in the kitchen.
Definitely.
And we spent, I think we did the math one time. I spent 3 hours in the studio for every hour I did live.
Wow.
Could you make that wow just like 3 seconds before? There's one, can you just, and it's like, well, it doesn't sound live anymore because, everything's perfect.
Yeah.
Like real life's not perfect. But that was another thing is that we spent a ton of time. I remember season 2 in the studio, just redoing things because the live call wasn't exactly what they wanted. So I can't imagine what it's like now. I don't think they do anything live now.
That's crazy. So talk a little bit about your black belt test. When did that happen, and kind of what was that experience like getting your BJJ black belt?
That's hilarious. They don't test.
It seems to be different. I've talked to some where there actually was a test and some where there actually wasn't. So it's
most old school, and I'm Carlson Gracie, so I'm an old school
definitely.
team, and my instructor got his black belt from Carlson Gracie. He came up with Vitor Belfort and Murilo Bustamante and all those guys, and Ricardo Laborios. He's an old school guy.
Okay.
Jimmy, your black belt. Here's your black belt.
Nice.
Thank you. It's your certificate, the black belt. Thank you, buddy. That's welcome.
Well, there you go.
You're black belt now. So I never don't test for. I've never tested for a belt in my life. Yeah, they just you're not brown belt. Thank you. Thanks, coach.
Do you still compete or no?
I haven't competed since I was a purple belt.
You haven't. Okay.
I think the last time I competed last year. I had an MMA fight. It was 2006, and I won the North American Championships. I won that one, purple belt.
Okay.
And then I had a fight in Michigan in MMA after Fight Quest, so like 2009 or 8 or something. And they ended up getting their license pulled last minute, and they had to make an amateur event. Well, I couldn't fight an amateur event because I was a professional. Mm-hmm. And so they had me and this guy who I was supposed to fight, who was a multiple-time Michigan state champion in wrestling. They had us grapple. I said, well, you guys can't fight, but I can put on a professional grappling match. And I armbarred him.
Nice.
That's the last time I competed.
Okay.
Was I a brown belt then? I don't know. Nah, probably not. I think I was just a purple belt.
Okay.
But that was the last time I competed. And then my schedule just doesn't allow me to train the 5 or 6 days a week I need to train to get back into competing, because those guys, somebody asked me, like I was at the Miami Open helping out my coach. My coach ended up actually winning the Miami Open and the Open Division. I'm going to brag for him.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the guys, oh man, does it make you want to compete again? And I said, do you see the name on that gi? And they went, yeah. I go, that's him. That's him. Hanato Silva Jiu-Jitsu. That's Hanato Silva. So all these guys, that's all they do all day. Yeah. That's all they do is jiu-jitsu. I don't have time to just do jiu-jitsu. Right. I can't do this anymore 5 days a week. I'm lucky if I do it. Today was my 4th day a week training in jiu-jitsu. I did open mat this morning. That's not easy for me. I happen to be able to grapple this morning because my family is in Miami visiting grandma. So I was able to do open mat. I just can't do open mat. So I'm not going to beat a guy who's, it's funny. I made Chael Sonnen laugh. One time we were talking. I said, dude, that guy's taking the skin off his chicken, man. And he started laughing. He goes, man, that's a great way to put it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do you know where that's from, by the way?
No, I don't actually.
Point Break. Remember Point Break?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
And he goes, I demand that all my agents practice physical fitness. I take the skin off chicken, sir.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's always my metaphor for somebody who takes it really seriously. The guy's taking the skin off his chicken. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I take the skin off chicken, sir. Fucking Keanu Reeves, right?
That's awesome.
So that's always my metaphor. Dude, that guy's taking the skin off his chicken. He's like measuring his protein and cutting weight. Like, dude, I have 2 kids. I don't have, time. I can't, and these guys but your masters. I'm like, who's masters? Ted Shaolin, friggin' every ass kicker when I was coming up, they're all my age now. And they're still multiple time world champions. And they take it really seriously. And I can't, if you didn't go out there with Megaton Diaz and think, oh, I got an old man in front of me. Good luck with that. Yep. Good luck with that. Shaolin's in his 40s. Shaolin was smoke most 25-year-olds that are really into it. Can't roll with that guy, Yep. Yeah. So it's just, it's not a lifestyle, which it has to be that I can practice anymore. It's like, hey, don't you want to, it's like Shaq going on the NBA court right now. It's like, yeah, he was great a while ago, but
exactly
can't keep up with those kids anymore, So yeah, that's kind of my attitude.
And like you said, you're super busy. I mean, so kind of talk about your current projects. You mentioned ESPN, you have the SiriusXM thing. Kind of just talk a little bit about each of those and kind of where people can hear you now.
Yeah, well, SiriusXM is my daily gig. 2 to 5, Unlocking the Cage with Jimmy Smith on SiriusXM Fight Nation.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's really cool. I talk about MMA 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
That's cool.
It's incredible when you think about it. And then I work for ESPN International. Every Wednesday, I do a thing called UFC Fight Camp. It airs on Thursday. I shoot it on Wednesday. It airs on Thursday. For ESPN International, it's called UFC Fight Camp. So we kind of preview the upcoming fight, and then we talk about last week's fight and do a bunch of fun stuff. I'm on it with Phil Murphy, who is fantastic. He's a host at ESPN. And then I do Combate, which is a Latin American promotion, and it's shot out of Miami, which is about an hour from me. And usually Saturdays, but sometimes Sundays is when I shoot that. And that airs on Paramount Plus and all over Latin America. It is really big in Latin America. I do the English commentary.
Okay. Wow.
So those are my 3 gigs right now, man. Those are the 3 things I'm doing that take up about 6 days a week.
Okay.
I rarely get a day off, or I get maybe 1 day off. Nice. So that's my life at the moment. I just work at a lot of different things because, I worked for Bellator for 7 years. It looks like they're looking for a buyer. And if you're dependent on Bellator, you now have to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's always the difficulty with kind of having the one gig or being somebody's guy. Like when I was with UFC 2018, at the end of 2018, they said, oh, we're just going with former fighters. So you're unemployed. And it's just, you just got to go, oh, crap, start over. And you learn from those experiences of that is not happening to me again. I'm not working for one person whose my employment is kind of at their whim, right? I do 3 things because if one goes away, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'll be all right.
That makes sense. I mean, as someone with a former radio guy, any type of broadcast is just so unstable. You always have to have a backup plan, unfortunately. I mean, I did radio for technically I still dabble in radio, but I did radio for over 20 years. Most I made in radio was $11 an hour. So I know, and that's that. And I started in radio when I was 15 years old. So it's crazy, but I'm curious, in all your years of, martial arts, wrestling, everything you've been involved in, all the places you traveled in Fight Quest and stuff, is there one philosophy you've learned or picked up or maybe come up with on your own that just rises to the top, that sticks with you, you always come back to it?
Yeah, the Kung Fu instructor in China, he was like a 14th generation monk. Unbelievable. And what he'd do is he'd speak Chinese. It was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had in my life, where he would look at you and he didn't speak English and he would speak Chinese and you'd get what he was saying.
Wow. That's
just the
cool
way he would speak. You'd go, like the translator tell me, and I was like, yeah, that's what I thought he said.
Wow.
Just from like his body language and whatever it is, like he just communicated with you, It was effing weird. So I'm walking away from the Shaolin Temple. I'm about to go do my fight. I'm saying goodbye to everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I live there, by the way. Mm-hmm. That was not a put up either. I had somebody who worked for Discovery Channel in Singapore said, where did you stay in Thailand when you were shooting Fight Quest? And I said, I stayed in a bunk bed at the gym and I bathed in a trash bin. And she goes, no, when you weren't shooting. And I said, I stayed in a bunk bed at the gym. It wasn't fake. They would leave. The camera crew would leave and go, bye, Jimmy, and go to their hotel. And I stayed with the fighter.
That's awesome.
So I stayed at the Shaolin Temple in a little tiny monk room. And I'm leaving, and the master of this temple, the monk, the abbot, essentially, he turns to me and he raises his hand. He's standing at the top of these steps, and he shouts down in Chinese something. And I turned to my translator. I said, what did he say? And he said, doesn't matter, Jimmy, if you ever do Kung Fu again, be sure you're a good person.
Nice.
And it's always something to me where when people talk about martial arts, they talk about fighting or talk about this or talk about that. And I say, I haven't been in a street fight since high school. Why? I don't go running my mouth off like a fucking asshole. You would have to walk up to me while I'm minding my own fucking business and pick on me. I don't know if you know what I look like. I'm not built like somebody you'd walk up and just pick on.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't know that I fought professionally, I still look like I work out. And it's like, if you're honest with yourself, most of the times you've gotten in a fight, you were looking for one. You were being an asshole. You were drunk. You were belligerent. You were whatever. You were jealous. You were whatever. The darkness or problem in you led to that confrontation that probably didn't need to happen.
Right.
And I always tell people that. Oh, man, what would you do in a street fight? I haven't been in a street fight since I was 16. Why? I don't know. I don't act like I'm 12. My father, who could box, by the way, he was a pretty good boxer, but he wasn't very big. He was maybe like 5'5", 5'6", maybe. But he was like a scrappy dude. And what he used to tell me is he said, wolverines and bobcats have no natural predators. Not that a bear can't eat a bobcat or can't eat a wolverine. It's not worth the meat.
Nice.
Right?
I like that.
That was always my dad's philosophy. Fight so hard, it's not worth it. Fight so hard and give them a look like, if you fuck with me, yeah, you might win, but you're not going to feel good tomorrow. And they'll leave you alone. Right?
Like
no, bears don't eat bobcats. They go, it's not worth eating that. Could they? Sure, but it's not worth the wound you're going to get from a bobcat for the meat you get from eating a bobcat.
Right.
And like I tell people, it's about attitude. It's about respect. It's about your own self-respect and your own dignity. Keep you out of so many situations. I remember walking out of the Broadway gym in LA where I was training boxing, and it's in the middle of the hood in Inglewood. Bad neighborhood. And I'm going across the street, and it was like a movie. 5 gangsters were sitting on my car. Yes, I'm coming out of a boxing gym, right? So I had a bag that said Broadway gym. It was obvious I was coming out of a boxing gym. And I looked at them and said, pardon me, gentlemen, I need to get to my car. And they looked at me like they had never been called gentlemen in their lives. And they got out of the way. I got in my car and drove off.
Nice.
I just said, pardon me, gentlemen, I need to get to my car. I wasn't afraid, but I wasn't disrespecting them. I didn't, look freaked out and I'm going to call the cops. I said, pardon me, gentlemen, if you try to rob me, I'm going to fight you. Pretty obvious from, where I'm coming from, that if all 5 of you jump me, 5 of you and 1 of me, but at least 2 of you are going to be in trouble tomorrow, right? Like, going to hurt you bad enough that you're not going to like it. And they all got out of the way, and I got in my car and drove away.
That's awesome.
If you're not looking for a problem, you won't find one usually. And that's what I try to teach people. What about this? What about that? Look, you make up a million stupid scenarios in your head about what could happen and how you would need to fight and da-da-da. Like, okay, sure, but 9 times out of 10, you can avoid a situation. And there are situations where all the martial arts in the world ain't going to get you out of it.
Right.
So, like, be ready for all that stuff. So I think that sticks with me more is the idea of, like, where your head is in these spaces, right? And walking into gyms where you've never been before and don't know anybody and you got to spar and, just be respectful and take your ass whooping when you need to. And that's what martial arts teach you, I think, is sometimes you just can get your ass kicked and you just got to just go, meh, and deal with the ass whooping and move on. Is more important than any technique you could ever learn. Because I try to teach these kids. I was like, dude, I've been housed, man. I don't know how many effing times I've just gotten creamed by somebody who was really good in this one specific art I did, and I was doing or whatever. Just gotta check it off your list and move on. And that's the biggest, man. That is.
I like it. So you mentioned 2 kids. Now, did any of your kids get involved in martial arts at all?
Well, they're 2 and 4.
Oh, okay. Still pretty young. Okay.
Yeah, I had kids pretty late in life.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of getting my girl involved. She's 4,
okay.
and she's a big 4-year-old. She's tall. But another thing, and people ask me this all the time, I want to get my kid in MMA. And I always say, slow your roll. I saw kids fighting Muay Thai in Thailand that were like 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
That had skill. Like, they were good. And I went, really? Like, yeah, I know they're making more money than their parents make in a fucking week with what they make, and they're helping their family and stuff. But what we know about the development of the brain, right? Like, concussion is much worse at 9 than it is at, 30.
Definitely.
I always tell parents, put your kid in something they like. And if they want to add to that and do MMA, great. Don't force them into combat sports. It's too difficult. It's too dangerous. It's too challenging. It's all these things for somebody that is there because their mommy wants them to.
Right.
Get what I'm saying? If you want your kid in soccer and they don't want to be in soccer, they're just going to look stupid on the field for an hour. Okay. Yeah. Like, if you put your kid in boxing and they don't want to be in boxing, they get the shit kicked out of them. That isn't worth it, So I always say, put your kid in something A, they enjoy, and B, make sure it's kid appropriate. Meaning, right. USA Boxing has a kids boxing program. As they have big headgear, these big puffy gloves, and coaches who are working with kids all the time. Jiu-jitsu has the same thing. Kids classes where they're just kind of goofing around and doing stuff. And make sure it's something kid appropriate, right? Because so many people put kids with like these murderers doing Muay Thai, and like, dude, Muay Thai is just Muay Thai. They don't really have like kids Muay Thai. So I'd hold off on that until they're ready. So stuff like that, put them in something they enjoy. And then if they gravitate to that, that's on them. But don't force it on them. Like any other sport, I was a baseball player, so you're going to be a baseball player. I think it's terrible.
Yeah.
So,
all right, I got a few fun questions to wrap up.
Sweet.
Now, it doesn't have to be 4. I've had as few as 2 and as many as 8. So just 3, 4, 5 names that you would put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts.
Ooh, that's a good one. My Mount Rushmore. All right, to not put Bruce Lee is just absurd.
He's probably the most picked one, so that's okay.
I'm not going to be that guy. I would say just the way I think, and I'm being really biased here, Carlson Gracie, right? That's my lineage for my black belt.
Yep.
He's a guy who took jiu-jitsu, and all the great fight teams right now are kind of descendant from him. So Dede Pendaneres was a Carlson guy. He's Novignon, which is Jose Aldo's team, and some great fighters out of Brazil, Renan Barão, and those guys. American top team, Ricardo Laborio, and Conan Silveira were both Carlson Gracie guys. So Carlson was like the first jiu-jitsu guy, first Gracie to really have a great MMA team. Nice. So that's why I put him on my list. I think he's the bridge between MMA and jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
I would he is unbelievably revered in Japan. I'd put Masayama on there. Kyokushin. Very cool. Masayama, he's like a god to them in Japan, but really, really good. Great, actually, Kyokushin fighter and a legend in that. And then my number 4, Ernesto Hoost.
Okay.
Because K1, which was, the Japanese kickboxing, it was just the biggest thing on earth. Yeah. Ernesto Hoost was the man when it came to K1, man, and heavyweight kickboxing. He was absolutely unbelievable. I got to put number 4. I got to put Ernesto Hoost. So my 4 is Bruce Lee, Carlson Gracie, Masayama, and Ernesto Hoost.
That's a hell of a Mount Rushmore. I like it.
I try.
All right. How about a favorite martial arts book?
Ooh, that's a good one. Matthew Polly has a great biography of Bruce Lee.
Okay.
That is really excellent. Check that out.
Okay.
The Art of Expressing the Human Body by Bruce Lee is also fantastic. Those are the two that it's war and it's martial arts. It's I'm trying to think of which one I really want to go with here. Book of Five Rings is great.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's war and martial arts.
Yeah.
But the Book of Five Rings, I would say those 3 would probably be my favorite. Yeah, they're all great books.
Cool.
I read like a maniac. I'm always reading. So
I used to read a book a week until I started the podcast. And now I've maybe read 3 books in the last 2 years. I spent all my free time doing the podcast. So I need to get back to reading.
Well, I think part of it too is when I was on the road, I would read constantly because you're always in an airport. You're always, you got a 3-hour delay, and I'm like, all right, I'll bring a book.
Yep.
And I'm not a really social person. So rather than if I have to wait for something, if I'm stuck, I read a book because I just don't like waiting for no reason. So that's another one of my things. Yeah.
Nice. How about a favorite martial arts video game? Are you ever a gamer?
Yes. And I gotta say, all time, and me and my best friend used to play this one all the time. Soul Calibur, remember that one?
Names, I don't think I ever played it, but I recognize the name.
That was like our favorite because it was a sword, Soul Calibur. So it was kind of martial arts weapons, and like one guy was nunchucks, and the other guy was samurai swords. That was my favorite. Played that a million times. But me and my brother also, just the original Street Fighter and Street Fighter Alpha, we played that constantly as kids.
Nice.
All the time. And my brother and I, he kind of looks like Ryu and I kind of look like Ken. So I was Ken and he was Ryu, and we'd fight each other, and that was our thing. It was
That's
great.
awesome.
Yeah, those martial arts video games, those are my favorite.
Very cool. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Ooh, that's a good one. Wow. You know what's funny? I'm going to go kind of modern on this one. I'm watching a show right now called Alice in Borderland. Do you know about it?
No, I don't.
Oh my God. It's on Netflix. It's amazing.
Really?
Amazing. Called Alice in Borderland. It's a Japanese show. And what it is these people wake up and everybody's gone out of Tokyo. They're gone.
Oh, wow.
And just these few people are left, and there's these things where these games pop up. And you have to play these games, and if you survive, you get more time alive. Because when they call it your visa, and once your visa expires, you die. So you play these games, and the winner gets more time on their visa. But a lot of them, they integrate martial arts into it.
Oh, cool.
So there'll be this thing like you got to beat this guy. It's like a video game in real life. Like if you don't beat this big boss, you die. And when it comes to they throw all these people in, they're like these martial arts. It's really cool. It's and it's got a lot of game theory. You have to trust the person you're with. So I'll describe one of the games, and if you're a dork, you'll like it because I'm a dork. Okay, these people had these collars on, a collar around their neck. It's steel; it can't come off. They can't turn it. And on the back, there's a little screen. And what it is it's of the 4 suits, right? Clubs, diamonds, spades, hearts, right?
Okay.
And someone has to tell you what your suit is, and then you guess your suit, and if you're right, you live. If you don't, the collar blows up.
Wow.
But they have to kill this one person, and they don't know who it is.
Oh, wow.
Right. The game is over when this one person dies, but you don't know who it is. And the game goes on until so they have all this food and water, and they're like, if game's not over till you kill that person. Well, who do I kill? Do I trust the person who told me what mine is? Do I tell the person what theirs is? Am I accurate? Because one less person is one less person. So the psychology of who do I trust and it's brilliant, but it integrates a lot of martial arts. So I'm going to put that there. Before you even say it, I'm going to tell you a martial arts movie that is underrated.
Okay.
That you might not even think of.
Okay.
But if you've been in a fight, it is shot. It's one of the few I don't want to say fight movies, but it's around a fight that looks how a fight feels. You get what I'm saying? Snatch.
Oh, great movie.
The boxing scene in Snatch where it slows down, it's like, and then it's like, and suddenly it's really fast. That's how a fight feels. You know what I mean? Like, you get hit and you're like, everything's kind of, whoa. And then when somebody throws a jab and you're like, where the fuck did that jab come from? Right?
Yep.
The way it was shot by Guy Ritchie, it's one of the few fight sequences, the bare knuckle scene with Brad Pitt and the big fat dude, looks how a fight feels. Remember, it would show it from his perspective, and the audio would be like, because you don't hear the crowd, you just hear like this, whoa. And I was like, God, man, they really nailed it. It's one of the best shot fight scenes ever. Is Snatch, the bare knuckle scene.
See, and that actually, you just answered my final question is, was favorite movie fight scene. So you just answered that one, but what about just a favorite martial arts movie? Yeah, well,
we actually had a fun conversation, me and my producer, about whether or not that's a fight movie or a gangster movie.
Right.
Because it's based around a fight, right? This bare knuckle fight. But it's really a gangster movie. But the end scene of bare knuckle is one of the few a fighter will watch and go, yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah. Where time is like slows up and speeds up and slows down. You don't know, you're like, depending on what's happening. It's very true. Yeah, so that's my favorite.
You were definitely the first one to pick Snatch, for sure. I've had a few odd ones. Like I had someone pick Princess Bride for favorite fight scene. which was
that's great. Andre the Giant.
Yeah, which was kind of cool. So yeah, no, that's awesome. So before I let you go, anything else maybe that I didn't get to mention or forgot to ask you that you want to get out there?
Wow. That's a very broad. I'm a Virgo.
Long walks on the beach.
Long walks on the beach. Yeah, man. It's I'm just grateful that I'm able to be in martial arts for 23 years, 24 years, because it's seen a lot of people come and go, man. I've seen a lot of stuff come and go, and I've seen a lot of people not be able to make a living the way I made a living, and I'm just eternally grateful for that and my ability to keep on chugging. Don't know how much longer, but I will keep on chugging as long as humanly possible. And you got to be grateful for that. And I am.
Knowing how busy you are, I truly appreciate your time, because I know, like you said, you're working 5-6 days a week sometimes with your 3 gigs and taking the time to do a podcast that you'd never heard of. I truly appreciate it, because I love doing this and love talking to different people and hearing their stories and backgrounds and learning more about them. So it's been a blast doing this.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot, bud.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.